You know, I have the Battle Network logo as the profile pic for the channel, and I've yet to make a video about it. Let's fix that. Megaman is known for having multiple series, as well as different renditions of the character. If you read the title, then you already know the one we're focusing on today. It's this one. The Battle Network series distinguished itself as one of the more unique interpretations of the franchise, undergoing a drastic change from its source material while still retaining some of that essence of what makes it Mega Man. Because of these drastic changes, there was a risk that loyal fans might not take too kind to the new series and could deviate them from the product entirely. But Capcom took a risk and found a good amount of success, creating what is hard to argue a timeless game series, and maybe the only one of its kind. But what is it about this game that garnered the attention of the fans? What made it stand out? What made it unique? It's the combat system. There, I just saved you like 30 plus minutes of time. That is a simplified answer, I know, but yes, the battle system plays a major key role for the game's identity and success, but it wasn't the only factor. Capcom put a lot more effort into advertising this series. Shocking, I know, Capcom actually properly advertising something Mega Man related, which would result in getting some pretty good attention from both veterans and newcomers. It would later lead up to Battle Network 4 selling over 1 million units, an accomplishment that is not commonly seen in Mega Man titles. Out of all the titles, it had to be BN4. Why couldn't it be BN3 instead? However, it would not be the only title with this privilege, as the Legacy Collection would become the fastest selling Mega Man game with over 1 million units sold in the first 2 weeks. So Battle Network 4 sold over 1 million copies twice. That's crazy. But we're not here to talk about numbers. Mostly. To briefly explain the series, because I have viewers that watch these videos that have no clue what Battle Network is a tactical role-playing game with real-time action elements, or as Capcom would describe it, a data action RPG, taking place in a separate timeline from the original Mega Man series, where Dr. Light, or Tadashi Hikari if you want to keep it lore consistent, focused on making advancements around the internet rather than robotics. You take control of 2 characters, Len Hikari, a net battler and the character you control in the real world, and Megaman.exe, Lance Net Navi, who navigates the cyber world. Throughout the course of the series, they stop multiple crime syndicates from utilizing the internet to commit acts of terrorism and trying to take over the world. Typical standard stuff you would see in RPGs. You got your bad guys, you got your dungeons, you got your random encounters, but the one thing that makes it stand out from other games of this genre, till this day, is the battle system. We've been over this. We literally just talked about it like a minute. Okay. But what is it about the combat that makes it distinctive? Look at this. Have you ever seen this in any other game? How often do you see a battle system like this? It's not like your traditional turn-based game or action game or deck building game. In fact, it kind of combines all those elements. The battle system incorporates real-time action with strategy acting as the core that wraps it all together, giving you the option to select between various weapons as well as when and where to use them. Capcom put these ideas together and developed Battle Network 1. And it's pretty bare bones, all things considered. Fortunately, the sequels managed to build on that framework, adding new mechanics and refining what they established to make the gameplay complex, resulting in what is still to this day a one-of-a-kind series. Each title has its unique gimmicks and mechanics that somewhat change the dynamic of combat. So we're going to be mostly talking about the mechanics that are more universal throughout the games, and as we go along we'll touch on some of the more unique mechanics and break down their purpose. Afterwards we'll also touch on the impact this series has left, so we'll talk about some community stuff like the PvP, the fan games, and titles inspired by it. So if you guys are ready for another Yap Fest, get some drinks, some snacks, and get yourselves comfortable. And while you're at it, be sure to drop a like on the video and sub to the channel. I'm very close to reaching the 1K milestone, and it would really mean a lot if you guys can help support the channel. With that out of the way, let's bust some viruses. Once you're in battle, Mega Man is placed in a 6x3 grid battlefield that is very reminiscent of a chessboard, then presented with a menu known as the custom screen that shows a variety of weapons and abilities. These are called battle chips, and they are the equivalent of cards. If you've played games like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Slay the Spire, then you should be more or less acquainted with how battle chips work on a systematic level. Capcom took a lot of inspiration from card games, since at the time they were becoming increasingly popular and would later become an element that would help shape the core combat of the Battle Network games. Each chip has its own unique art and logo that helps you quickly identify the type of weapon before even having to hover on it. The battle chips that show up on the screen depend on your equipped folder. which is this game's terminology of a deck. The order gets randomized every time you start a battle. Now, for the sake of balancing, the developers established a couple of rules to prevent you from breaking the game. One such rule is not having the ability to select every single chip that shows up, unless they have the same name or have the same code. The only exception is if a chip has a start code, in which case you can use it with any code. You also cannot select more than 5 chips per round. I mean, if you were able to pick every single chip that shows up, it will be broken. Like, come on, guys. Like, that'd be really broken, insanely broken. The order in which you choose them is also the order you use them in battle, so you can't cycle between your selected chips. Keep this tidbit in mind because it's going to be important for another mechanic we'll talk about later on. There are many ways to tackle battles, and with a well-established folder, you can have multiple solutions to solve a problem. Limiting the chip usage prevents you from utilizing multiple solutions or strategies in one round. After all, with a good strategy and a little bit of luck, all it takes is one round to end the battle. Once your chips are selected, you are now ready to go. This is where the real-time aspect comes into play. The red-colored tiles indicate the space you can move around it. While the standard start to a battle has you and the enemy separated in a 3x3 space, there are certain actions or instances where either side can seize a row for themselves. We'll expand more on this as we go. You can attack with your selected chips, as well as your Mega Buster, which acts as your secondary weapon. What, you weren't expecting to have a Mega Buster here? Expecting Megaman to not have his Buster is like ordering a hamburger and expecting no patty on it. It's an integral part of the character. The chips you selected can only be used once in battle, so if you miss your attack, tough luck, you're not getting that chip back until the next battle. So you can imagine how painful it is when you're using a super powerful chip and you end up missing entirely. Oh my fucking god! It becomes an integral part of the gameplay to learn the enemy's attack patterns, since every enemy has unique attacks, movement patterns, and gimmicks that force the player to switch up their strategies, not just for them individually, but also as a collective. In addition, every enemy has a stronger version of itself, having slight alterations to their designs to distinguish them. They don't just hit harder, there's change in their timings of their movement patterns, and sometimes their attacks get unique qualities among other differences. Initially, I thought reusing old enemies by making a stronger version was a lazy way to add difficulty, but looking back at this now, it was a really smart way to integrate progression, because it feels like there is an organic progression. You fight enemies that are still familiar, but now they're faster, stronger, smarter. Not really. Almost like in Universe, the AI in these viruses is learning, improving, and adapting. I might be overanalyzing, but considering how AI operates, drawing on data from different sources, it actually makes sense within the Battle Network universe why certain viruses are stronger in specific areas. I find it cool how this indirectly reinforces the game's central setting. And this is not getting into how certain builds and chips do better or worse against specific enemies. Some chips are borderline useless on some enemies if you don't have the proper setup. It all depends on how they are positioned and what their movement patterns are, since some attacks can either be too slow or lack the range to hit certain distances. Some chips allow you to attack from any distance, some have you spawn a gadget or a virus to do the attacking for you. Others have you attacking on a specific tile. Really, there's a big selection to experiment with. When it comes to defense, you also have a good selection to choose from. Invisibility and anti-chips become really useful when challenging bosses, giving you small periods of time to null incoming attacks while giving you an opportunity to counterattack or gather information on their behaviors. Having a balance between offensive and defensive chips can help you navigate through most situations, provided you're willing to put in the work to collect them. Now, I spoke about chip variety earlier, and I gotta be honest, a lot of these chips are copies of each other. You see, just like how enemies get stronger versions of themselves, chips also get stronger iterations. So you get chips like Cannon, H Cannon, and M Cannon. These are basic examples, but you get the idea. Despite this, it still brings a lot of room for experimentation. Each iteration of a chip brings a different set of codes, so a chip that might be on the weaker side could prove to be useful in a specific folder with other stronger chips. Every chip has a place if you're creative enough. However, that's not going to be much of the case when you're in the early stages. When you start off, you get some basic chips to get you accustomed to the game's systems and mechanics. As you go along, you will eventually start earning more chips, and that's when the game truly opens up, offering a wider range of options. I think a hallmark of a good deck builder is when a player is given a diverse amount of cards, or in this case chips, and can make a multitude of different good decks that are fun and viable. Battle Network understood that assignment. Just go nuts, man. Just go nuts with all these chips. The chip variety leaves room for player expression, opening up avenues for different playstyles. You are able to play aggressive, defensive, or something in between. I know that I'm somewhat simplifying it, but you guys get the idea. You can make some pretty ludicrous folders and get some disgusting combos if you know what you're doing. Just take a look at this clip from our resident godlike Battle Network player, Dirge.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
Is this not insane? I strive to have this level of skill one day, so to me, this shit is inspiring. The core combat goes like this. You select your chips, the battle phase begins. When the gauge is charged, you can choose to pull up the custom screen and finish the round. You know, there was something that was said in this video about how the combat is like boxing. I didn't understand the comparison at first, but after looking into this with a bit more thought, I can see why that is the case. My brain got an extra brain cell like a 1-up from Mario Bros. Chips you didn't choose in the previous round return, now mixed with newly draw ones. This loop continues until the battle ends or your folder runs dry, at which point the custom screen will be empty and your Mega Buster becomes your best friend. Resource management is a part of the combat. You can execute multiple strategies in battle until you can't. There's only so many times you can fail to execute a strategy, and God forbid you enter a battle and your folder proves to be mostly ineffective against the enemy. Good luck getting your way out of that one. If your initial hand lacks synergy or useful combo potential, you might choose to expend the weaker chips and hold out, anticipating a better selection in the next round. It's not the most clean or smooth strategy, but these situations can happen even with a well-built folder. It can drag a battle out because sometimes you don't get the chips you need for a combo or a setup or a program advance. So you can imagine how it feels like running a folder with chips that don't work well in tandem. This is seen especially when you're starting from the beginning, since you do receive basic chips that don't really synergize with each other well, but it was done with the purpose of understanding the mechanics. So it's already throwing a slight hint at you for what the main consequences are for having a poorly built folder. You got chips with more than 5 different codes? Don't expect to carry multiple chips per round. There's a lot of scenarios that can happen depending on the chips you draw and enemies you fight. Your folder determines how enjoyable battles can be, and one that isn't particularly well built can make battles drag out and make them more arbitrary than they should, consequently affecting your performance in battles. And when you don't do well in battles, it reflects on your busting rank. Most of the times you don't need to get an S rank, although having an S rank does help a lot when you're searching for a chip. But when you're almost at the end game, or you reach the post game, or you're trying to dip your toes in the PvP side, having a focused folder is practically necessary. Despite this, when you consider the nature of the battle system, even with a Unicode build, there's always that one chance you won't get the chips you're looking for. And I speak from experience. But that's part of the gameplay's charm. Your adaptability gets tested in these situations. Because with the resources you're given at that turn, you're always going to ask yourself, what can I do with these chips? Is there something I can do that can land big damage? Maybe I got some utility chips that help me set up an attack on the next turn, and so on and so forth. You have to work with what you get and try to get the most value out of the chips you currently have, and all of this serves as a way to keep you engaged to the combat. It kind of also makes the battles refreshing in their own way, since you never know what you're gonna get in any given time. There are certain ways that help you get around that process and just increase the chance of receiving the chips you're seeking. Every game has a system in place that can affect the amount of chips you get in the custom screen. The first 3 games have the add function, with the first one working slightly different, albeit more short-sightedly than the ones from 2 and 3. But the idea remains the same. Using this feature will net the player additional chips the next time the custom screen is charged, at the expense that you battle without chips for a turn. The game is fully aware that you're not going to get the chips you're looking for all the time, so it's giving you an option in the case you are given a bad hand. We've already established that you'll want to seek out chips that synergize or combo with one another, but those aren't the only reasons. You see, there's a mechanic they don't tell you outright. Remember how I stated earlier that the codes and the order in which you select your chips are also important? By selecting a specific combination of chips and initiating the battle phase, it will show your chips being compressed into one strong attack to use in battle. This is a program advance. A really powerful mechanic that rewards you for going out of your way to learn the nuances of the battle system. It enriches the strategy of both combat and deck building. And to take full advantage of it, you must tailor your folder to work with specific chip codes. I mean, you already had to if you wanted access to as many resources as possible, but with program advances added to the mix, it can amplify your arsenal to an extraordinary degree. It opens up a variety of possibilities when thinking about what kind of combinations you can run in a single folder. One example I can give is a Unicode folder. Unicode folders are basically folders that run on a single letter code and some star codes sprinkled in between. Some program advances can get accessed in that way. Personally, this is my favorite type of folder to run, especially in Battle Network 5. I find this build to be possibly the easiest to play with, since you're always going to have availability of weapons and utility while also having a better folder flow. The only flub here is if you run a Giga chip, since they tend to be off-code. Thankfully, Giga chips are very strong on their own, so it kinda offsets that problem. Okay. That's cool. But what if the player wanted to use a program advance that utilizes different codes? For that, you'll have to get really creative with your build. As we talked about, working with different codes can make your folder a little unreliable at times. I will say that because you're working with multiple codes, it kinda gives you more leeway to add chips of that code group that may not be tied to the program advance. It can bring more versatility to your kit. A cool detail is that to activate these PAs, you need to select the chips in alphabetical order. So in the case you choose the same type of chips but have the codes in alphabetical order, there's a possibility you could have discovered a PA by accident on a first playthrough. A lot of the program advance animations emphasize their destructive power, whether through screen shakes, summoning ally navies to attack, or just overwhelming the battlefield. The way they are presented makes it clear that these attacks are anything but ordinary chip moves, enhancing the satisfying feeling when you use them and intrinsically motivating players to seek them out. What's funny about this is that you can play the whole main story without ever finding out that program advances are a thing. And I should know because I was one of those people when I played the games for the first time. Now the internet has become the norm, so we can just look up a list of all the PA chip combinations. But back then, when the internet wasn't as big or accessible, you had to scout around the game and look for combinations on the internet forums. Like, actually in-game, I'm being serious. Going out of your way to look for this information and trying them out for yourself would reward you with this hidden mechanic, and it just encouraged you to interact with the world a bit more to see what other combinations or secrets you could find, subsequently expanding your repertoire to use against the more challenging enemies. Customizing your own personal folder becomes its own separate game. You're frequently going to be given new chips to try out and understand, so you're going to be watching this screen a lot as you mix and match while trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. Experimenting with different combos or setups that you have the most fun with and fits your playstyle. Every battle is like a puzzle you have to solve. Every time you enter a battle, you're given different pieces, and with those pieces, you have to figure out a way to dispose of your opponents as efficiently as possible. That pretty much covers up the basic structure of the battle system. Of the first 3 games. See, after the 3rd installment, they made some changes and inclusions to the battle system. You no longer had the add function in the custom screen, but instead, you now have an entirely separate mechanic called Double Soul, or Soul Unison. They're both the same thing. Battle Network 6 is slightly different because they basically changed Double Soul with the cross system and added the beast down mechanic as well, which unfortunately I'm not going to talk about in this video. Maybe I'll talk about it in another video at some point in the future, because I really do like this mechanic. And if I'm going to talk about them, it deserves its own video. Just look at these designs right here. Like, look at this. This is Aura Incarnate. Okay, I gotta stop myself from fanboying over this. I gotta get back on track. Double Soul replaces both the add function and style change mechanics. To keep it short, the style change is a form that you get by fulfilling certain conditions, and it would modify Megaman's elemental properties as well as change the Buster's weapon. To draw a comparison, it's the equivalent of classic Mega Man's weapon change. The same goes for Double Soul, which seems to be a direct integration of that system. Double Soul will have you change to different forms, and like style change, it modifies Mega Man's Buster and elemental affinities. The drawback to this is that you need to sacrifice a chip to transform, and you can only keep the transformation for 3 turns before changing back. The cross system, while similar, does have some key differences. It's like a combination of style change and Double Soul, but without the chip penalty. Relative to Double Soul, it's more freely accessible, seemingly designed with PvP in mind. You can even use it in tandem with Beast Out to make some interesting combinations and dish out some unique attacks. But for now, let's focus on Double Soul, since I think this mechanic is the most interesting one, and I think it highlights some of the more prominent elements of the combat system. Like previously mentioned, you have to sacrifice a chip for you to transform. The form you get depends on the element type the chip carries. So say you want to use the attack plus 10 chip. Its element type is a plus element, meaning you can use it to transform into Number Soul. By using this form, every time you load up the custom screen, you get access to 10 chips instead of the standard 5 for 3 turns, exponentially speeding up the pace of the battle since you now have a higher chance of getting access to combos, program advances, or chips you're just seeking out early in the battle. Every Double Soul carries unique abilities that can be useful in certain situations. Some can be used for general purposes, some are more circumstantial. Because of these abilities, you're required to think of the situation you're in right now and conclude whether it's the right time to use a Double Soul or not. But wait, once my 3 turns are up, can't I just activate the same soul unison again? No, you can't. You see, once you fully commit to a specific soul, you cannot use it again in the same battle. So in the case you're using, let's say, Number Soul, and then switch to Toad Soul, you will not be able to use the former again. You're forced to weight the risk versus reward. Is this the right moment for a Double Soul? Do I have the chips to make this soul work? Is this Double Soul good against these enemies? It all depends on your playstyle and the strategy you're going for at that given time. Of course, the Double Soul you're likely to use is mostly determined by the type of folder you build. It's also worth considering the elemental changes, since some enemies can absolutely destroy you if you use the wrong Double Soul. Let's just say that using a water type soul against an enemy with electric attacks is not the smartest idea. I could go on and on explaining the souls individually, but the real point I want to make is how many elements and mechanics are constantly intertwining. You've got the deck building, the real-time action, the form changes, the emotion status, the chip combinations, and that's not even touching the absurd number of chips in each installment. All of these elements prevent the combat from feeling shallow, and they mesh together so seamlessly that you sometimes forget that you're even playing a deck builder. And all of this, you want to take this one, Todd?
All of this just works. It's not, I'm not kidding.
Thank you, Todd. The battlefield can become your best friend or your worst enemy. It can have various terrains that can be either hazardous or give opportunities for the skilled player. This becomes another tool the player can use against enemies. Likewise, some enemies can use this against the player. It's here where the game gives you more ideas to experiment with. You can manipulate the battlefield and its hazards with the right chips, helping you set up some nasty combos, or just giving you the positional advantage. You can steal their tiles and make them your own, effectively trapping them and limiting their movement. The status of the battlefield can determine the outcome of a battle, sometimes even turning the tide against the opponent if you're in a pinch, ensuring that battles remain dynamic and engaging since you have to adapt to any hazards you may encounter. Say you change the enemy tiles to an ice panel, or you just randomly came across it. If you were to have a chip with an aqua element, hitting an enemy in an ice panel will result in freezing them. I don't think I need to explain what you can do afterwards. You're given all these different tools and chips and different ways to battle, and it's great. I think it's amazing. Of course, all of this is only as effective as your movement. Movement overall is pretty simple, but if you've seen some higher level bosses or PvP battles, it can get real deep. Most enemies have indicators to tell you where the attack is heading. Because movement is so simple, it allows players to focus less on complex execution and more on reading patterns and anticipating attacks. While it is possible to react to attacks in real time, doing so reliably often requires preparation and familiarity with enemy behaviors. As a result, battles place a stronger emphasis on pattern recognition and strategic foresight than on raw reflexes, highlighting the game's distinctive balance between action and strategy. By knowing how an enemy attacks, it gives you an idea of how you should be moving around. Naturally, as the player encounters stronger adversaries, their attacks become more chaotic, thus making battles more hectic. What the fuck is this? Am I playing a bullet hell? Careless movement is almost guaranteed to get you hit, as the game expects you to adapt and apply what you've learned at higher levels. But we can take this a step further. If the player masters timing and pattern recognition, they can use that knowledge for something much more than just dodging. This is where the counter hit comes into play. Yeah, I know it's a shitty montage. I just wanted to showcase the mechanic. Leave me alone, alright? Now, what is a counter hit in this context? Basically is when your attack lands on the opponent on the startup frames of their own attack. If you're someone that's familiar with fighting games, then you should know that in some of those games, counter hitting can put you in an advantageous position, either giving you more attack power on combos or longer hit stun, potentially leading to combo opportunities that otherwise wouldn't be possible. The same thing happens here. Getting a counter hit rewards you with the enemy getting stunned for an extensive amount of time, giving the player a big window for their offense. I didn't really think about it before, but Battle Network and fighting games share some characteristics with each other. And as a guy that enjoys fighting games, it made me appreciate the Battle Network games even more. Considering how Capcom are the pioneers of the fighting game genre, I wouldn't be surprised if their experience on the genre helped shape the combat in some capacity. Now, while the mechanic was initially implemented in Battle Network 3, it didn't get fully fleshed out until Battle Network 4 and onwards. Alright, Battle Network 4, you got this one. Executing a counter hit will put you in the full synchronized state, thereby ensuring your next chip will inflict double the damage. However, the player has to be very careful not to get hit while in this state, because if they get hit once, they lose their full synchro. While the battle system does have arbitrary elements, ultimately player skill will be the prevalent factor in the outcome of battles. If you're really good at the game, you can shut down bosses entirely if you got those timings on point. And the player will get greatly rewarded for it, since counter hits contribute to the ranking at the end of battles, and you can get certain rewards from it. Getting S ranks in general is really difficult. I don't know if I just suck at the game or if it's like a consensus in the fandom that the ranking system can be strict, but it's definitely an aspect that strives you to keep improving at the game. Especially since there are certain chips that can only be obtained or have a higher chance of being obtained if you earned S ranks in battle. For enthusiasts and completionists, you are forced to, at the very least, have intermediate knowledge of the system mechanics if you want to earn every single chip. It becomes satisfying when you finally build that folder you worked so hard to put together and then start to get S ranks consistently. I know there's still other mechanics I haven't talked about. I could talk about how the Navi Customizer is used to micromanage certain aspects of Megaman to go in accordance with your playstyle, or I could go in depth about the emotion bar and what it can do aside from getting full synchro, but they all achieve what we've been talking about. All of these mechanics bring their own spice to the gameplay, bringing elements to help you come up with creative strategies. They give the player so much to work with, to express themselves in any way they want. It's like they are enticing you to try to break the game. It borrows a lot from the action genre, throwing physical challenges at you and forcing you to stay sharp as battles ramp up in speed, but at the same time, it contrasts that with the kind of slow and methodical planning you'd see from a tactical game. You'd think the fast-paced action would clash with the strategic side of things, but it all flows together very smoothly. While the action does play a big part of the experience, the design philosophy behind it makes it so having a good strategy can more than make up for the lack of mechanical skill. The developers themselves even highlighted this. That said, mechanical skill still matters. You can't just press a button and expect everything to fall into place. God, I wish that was the case with everything in life. You may have a plan that's effective on paper, but if your control of Megaman is subpar, you're gonna have a tough time executing it effectively. Combat really shines when you're up against the bosses. Every boss brings a unique gimmick to the table that sometimes forces you to rethink your approach, pushing you to tweak your folder if certain chips just aren't cutting it for that fight. One fight I'll bring up is the Shadow Man fight from Battle Network 5. He is a very fast character, too fast for anyone to keep up with. He's able to spawn shadow clones that roam the battlefield, and if left unchecked, they will attack a row with a wave of fire. While the real Shadow Man can be identified by his health number, his speed makes it tricky to quickly distinguish him from his clones, so your Buster ends up becoming an essential tool in this battle since it helps getting rid of the clones to single out the real one without wasting your resources. Once he attacks, there's a brief period where he's vulnerable. Or so you think. During this window, attacking him directly will make him jump out of the way and retaliate with a shuriken, so you have to figure out ways to bypass his tricks and land hits without falling into his counters. chips like cannons may seem too direct and slow for this particular fight, so they may not be as effective. Maybe using area grabs to limit his movements can be a good idea. It can also give you more openings while he's moving around. Or maybe try to use attacks that can hit multiple rows or diagonal angles. It's this kind of planning that will keep you trying new chips and discover different ways to approach a battle. Additionally, some bosses carry elemental affinities, once again bringing familiar elements from the platformer games. Some bosses can be more annoying and difficult to deal with than others, especially when you're facing the stronger versions of ones you've already beaten. Initially, the bosses will keep you on your toes and keep you guessing. Unlike how viruses have very straightforward patterns, you'll have to try a bit harder in learning and recognizing the behaviors of the bosses. But just like how you deal with viruses, it all comes down to how well you can adapt and how well you can execute your plan. You can have a good strategy and run a folder that can counter a specific boss, but it will be rendered meaningless if you can't execute it, leading to wasting resources, costing you your S rank, and potentially losing the battle. Just to be clear, I don't know much about the PvP. I've always been more of a making fucked up folders to bust viruses type of guy, so I'm not going to talk about the meta or anything of that sort, but I still felt it needed to be mentioned since the battle system was also designed with this feature as well. If there's one thing I know, is that you need to approach PvP with an entirely separate mindset, because I promise you, this is nothing like PvE. Your PvE skills won't exactly translate well on a PvP format, and with mind games becoming a really big part here, understanding the intricacies of PvP can take time. Strategies that you find to be effective against viruses might not be so effective against a real breathing human being. At the same time, chips that might not be so useful in PvE could find some worth in PvP. If you haven't watched this video, which I urge you guys to watch it because it's a really good video and it goes really in depth about the competitive scene, you might be asking, wait, there's people still playing Battle Network PvP? Yes. Moving on. The Battle Network community has withstood the test of time, with the competitive scene actively running online tournaments on a weekly basis. And thanks to the release of the Legacy Collection, they even got the chance to run a tournament at EVO. You know, like the biggest fighting game tournament of all time? Let me tell you, it was hype watching grand finals on the big stage.
Oh my god, no! Okay. How did he do that?
Well, at least I wish it did. It was ran as a side event, which is still really cool to see. As a Battle Network enjoyer, it does bring a smile to my face seeing other Battle Network fans keeping this game alive. Just goes to show how passionate the community is when it comes to these games. It puts into perspective how these games are so unique that the fans are still active in making events. It's like Smash Bros. Melee. It's never gonna die as long as there's passionate fans playing the games or hosting events for other fans to enjoy. Hell, they might just be passionate enough to make their own Battle Network games. Wait. Sadly, there's not many fan games to begin with. The only ones I can think of being Shanghai.exe, which is a fan game that crosses the gameplay of Battle Network with characters from the Toho series, and there's also Chrono X, which has been in development for like a decade or so. It's kind of like the Megaman X Corrupted of the Battle Network community, but at least with Chrono X, you have a demo so you can get a taste of what to expect. I for sure am going to cover this game when it fully releases. The devs have been taking their time with it, but it seems to be for a good reason, since with the demo you can see how much effort they've put into recreating the battle system with the polish you'd see from the official games. Really shows that they care in delivering a solid Battle Network experience. This brings me to my next point. It really surprises me the total lack of modern games using this battle system. I could probably count on one hand the number of games that have taken inspiration from Battle Network or tried to mix deck building with real-time action. Titles like One Step from Eden, Lunar Lux, and Cycle Versus, and even Inti Creates try to make their own spin on it with Card and CL, and I was trying to be hyperbolic when I said that I could count them with one hand, but I didn't expect to be right on that front. I guess if you want to count the fan games, they also apply. However, I don't think any of the previously mentioned games reached the mechanical depth the Battle Network games did. Granted, it took 6 games for them to get it as good as it is, but for a GBA game, Battle Network is robust. It has neatly packed systems that keep the gameplay interesting. It's complex, but never to the point where it feels overwhelming or unintuitive. And when everything clicks, pulling off a game plan that you came up with feels incredibly satisfying. And I'm not trying to draw comparison either. Even though they're inspired by Battle Network, they still bring originality to their gameplay. They mix things up and use the Battle Network combat as more of a template. The point here is that there's not a lot of games with the gameplay and complexity like Battle Networks, and there really hasn't been much of an attempt from any studio or development team taking a crack at this genre. And I can kinda understand why. Like, it's pretty intimidating. Like, try to design and balance 100 plus attacks with different animations and mechanics without breaking the game. It's a really tough thing to do. There's more reasons to it, like whether there's a market or an audience for it, and because this gameplay style is so unconventional, it can be a risk for a team to pour their efforts and resources into making something akin to this if there's no guarantee it'll pay off. Still though, I would love to see a more modern interpretation of this battle system, as I feel like it holds untapped potential. Unlike other genres that have steadily innovated and evolved over the years, this one has remained relatively unexplored. Star Force made an attempt to be the successor, and while it had its ups and downs, I do think it made good use of 3D models as well as dynamic camera work that made certain attacks look cool. The combat system from Battle Network with the style and camera work from Star Force could make something special, I'm telling you. These games mean so much to me. They were what introduced me to the RPG genre and practically shaped my love for the Mega Man franchise as a whole. I've played many games over the years and nothing has ever come close to the unique combat system Battle Network offered. The game that I played that comes close to it is One Step from Eden, which is a good game that you should buy. But it didn't really scratch that itch like the Battle Network games did. You won't be able to find a game like this in the current market, and it's a shame, because I do think the Battle Network gameplay has more room to explore and expand on ideas it has created, especially now since game development and technology has continued to evolve ever since the series first came out. I hope at some point in the future, someone, whether it's another indie or a game studio, hell, even Capcom, if they ever decide to remake the games or at least revisit the concept at some point, can further expand this gameplay style and perhaps give it a more modern flair to it. And that's gonna be it for this video. Took a while, but managed to get it done, and I really hope you guys enjoyed it. I actually wanted this to be a retrospective series at first, but it's kind of been done to hell and back, so I thought, hey, maybe an analysis for the combat would be a better idea. Although, if you guys are interested in a retrospective series, I'll be completely down to make one. I'll be 100% down to make one. I want to bring up a question to the viewers as well. If you're like a subscriber or you've continuously watched my videos, will you guys be interested in less heavy edited content? Because I don't know if you guys realized, it takes a while for me to get these video essays out. Like, it's insane. I really want the channel to be more active, so I thought about maybe making review type content like the one I did for Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, which was less heavy edited, and it took me like 2 days to make, so I don't know if you guys would be interested in that. Of course, the video essay format will not go away, but just to keep the channel active. If you guys are interested in that type of content, then let me know in the comments. Also, Star Force Legacy Collection hype? Let's go. Finally, Star Force is getting its chance to shine, and I really cannot wait for that collection. It's going to be hype. I'm definitely going to be streaming it, probably on YouTube and on Twitch, who knows. So if you guys want to see that when it drops, subscribe to the channel, and also leave a like on the video. With that, I'll leave you guys to it. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys take care, drink lots of water, and I'll see you all on the next video. Peace out.